Welcome back to Winners and Losers, ladies and gentlemen, the show we look at the weekend's Premier League football and what has gone on. And what a weekend we've had, especially if you're a Manchester United fan. Before we get to the football, Joe, how you doing, mate?
I feel sad. Football's affected my weekend. It really has. I went to a comedy club last night. They're very funny. Lifted my spirits for a couple hours, then brought back to crushing reality with that exit interview from Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, which pulled on the old heartstrings, didn't it? So yeah, a bit of a sad one. But how was yours, mate?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Not too shabby. Let's just get straight into it. The talking points, obviously, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, him being sacked. Manchester United lost 4-1 to Watford. Watford had a very good display. Manchester United, the whole performance was abysmal. Defensively, really, really bad. I don't really want to talk about the game, though, to be quite honest. We've got to talk about Ole. Joe, I just think you might as well take the floor, mate.
God. Do you know what, mate? I actually feel really sad. I feel really sad for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer because, let's face it, the last 2 months have been an absolute catastrophe and the time was right to sack him. He had to go. His position had become untenable. But that doesn't change the fact that, you know, he is a Manchester United fan. I've had the chance to speak to him. He is an absolutely lovely guy, very, very generous with his time. And I think that ex-interview, like I spoke about just then, really showed how much the club means to him and how emotional he was getting about leaving the club. And to be honest with you, yes, the last 2 months have been an utter show, been so bad, but I think in a few years' time, when we look back at Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's reign at Manchester United, it might not be defined by trophies, but I think he has left the club in a better position generally than when he took over. The squad is certainly in a more harmonious place and it's certainly much better in terms of quality. The academy system is finally kicking back up into gear. There are some levels behind the scenes that he's certainly improved. We finally got a technical director in. Whether or not he's the right man in Darren Fletcher and John Murtaugh remains to be seen, but at least there's processes that Ole's put in place that are going to help in the long term. Obviously in the short term it's not been good enough, but to be honest with you, mate, just quite sad to see the back of him because I really wanted Ole to succeed and it's obviously not worked out, and it's not like managers we've had in the past where I've been pretty delighted to see the back of them. With Ole, it was a bit of an emotional one, I'm not going to lie. It really did pull on my heartstrings when he was talking in that exit interview and he was saying about Carrick taking charge. I was pretty emotional. So that's my sort of thoughts on Ole leaving the club. What I will say is that the board and the team in charge of hiring the next manager and firing Ole, the lack of accountability for their mistakes is just embarrassing. The decision to give Ole Gunnar Solskjaer a new 3-year contract, 2 months ago, is an absolute calamity now you look back on it, isn't it? It's comical, quite frankly, and to be honest with you, didn't make an awful lot of sense at the time. It wasn't as if Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was being poached by other clubs and United were on the verge of losing him, was it? So why they gave him that extended contract, I'm not too sure. Mick Phelan got a new contract 47 days ago and is somehow still at the club. That's another issue I want to talk about. Why have Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's backroom staff been retained? Kieran McKenna's still there. Mick Phelan's still there. Okay, Michael Carrick's been put in interim charge, but part of the issue for Manchester United was the lack of coaching and, to be honest with you, a lack of tactics on the pitch. The only man who has fallen on his sword in this position is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. The rest of it has stayed the same. If you were the players looking at this, you must be thinking, well, what has actually changed? Is this not just a surface issue that's been dealt with and underlying issues remain? And to be honest with you, I have massive problems with that. I also have pretty big issues with this idea of bringing an interim manager in. I know we're going to discuss about potential candidates in a minute, but what, are we just writing off 60-70% of the season already? We've just decided that we've got £1 billion squad with some of the highest wages in world football, still in the Champions League, still in with a hunt of a top 4 spot, to be honest with you, and we're just going to write that off, are we? I think that's a bizarre decision, to be honest with you. So behind the scenes, the boardroom, absolutely shameful yet again. The footballing positions are not right. Ed Woodward not being good enough throughout his entire reign at Manchester United, and that continues. Yet to be convinced by Richard Arnold. The lack of accountability, like I said earlier, is frightening. To be honest with you, I thought it was summed up by the fact that Ed Woodward wasn't at the Watford game, Matt Judge wasn't at the Watford game, Richard Arnold wasn't at the Watford game. Any danger of some of them putting their face in front of a camera and saying, okay, look, I've made mistakes, this is how we're going to fix it? Because to continuously throw people under the bus is nothing short of a disgrace at this stage. And the fact it's happened to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who is a club legend, really makes my blood boil. So, yeah, to be honest with you, I have no faith in the board to appoint the right man. But nevertheless, to be honest with you, mate, I just feel a bit empty about Man United at the moment. I've got very, very little positive things to say.
I'm not surprised, mate. It's killer, and it hurts even more when it's a club legend. I think I've experienced it with Frank Lampard, and it's for a couple of days. It's quite numb. You don't know what way your club's going. It doesn't quite make sense to you at times. But I mean, we won the Champions League. Maybe there's some sort of positive out of it. I think might be a nice time here to play the video that Ole left with Manchester United. He did a leaving video. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think this is a good thing? Do you think it was the right thing to do? It's the first time I've ever seen something like this, a manager leaving or getting sacked and kind of doing a leaving interview. Have a look at this.
And I've had the opportunity, and I'm so honoured and privileged to have been trusted to take the club forward, and I really hope that I leave it in a better state than when I came.
Okay then, let me know what you thought of that interview in the comments below. But let's talk about the interim managers. Firstly, per Andy Mitten's article on The Athletic, he has said they understand that former United captain Steve Bruce, who was recently let go by Newcastle, would be very keen on the role and believes he could help stabilise the dressing room. I'm very sure he's keen. Joe, quickly, Steve Bruce?
It's just not going to happen, is it? Obviously, he's put his name forward. Of course he has. I would imagine about 5,000 managers across Europe have put their name forward to Manchester United in the last 24 hours over taking this role up. It's not going to be Steve Bruce. Like I said earlier, I still don't really understand the idea of putting an interim manager in charge. That would mean we've got 3 managers within the course of a year by the time that the actual permanent manager gets appointed in the summer. It's bizarre thinking, in my opinion. Bizarre thinking. But yeah, what do you think, Jalab? The idea of getting an interim manager for 6 months when Ole himself was an interim manager.
Yeah. It's. I mean, what it shows is that the board, who have had 3 months to look at what's been happening and to plan, and the past month and a half, especially after that Liverpool result, have done nothing, and their planning has been awful. Antonio Conte was available, and yes, whether he would have actually gone to United is a question, but he would have been a brilliant guy to bring in. You're now looking at the names like Zinedine Zidane, who's already pulled himself away from the United job, doesn't speak very good English, etc. And then you're left really with managers that are in jobs. And it just doesn't look quite like it's been thought through, especially the whole leaving the backroom staff. Like, don't get me wrong, it was the right thing to sack Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, but you're not really changing anything. Like, if you're not taking away the backroom staff and you're not bringing in something fresh and new, then what was the point? Like, you've still got the same thing. You've just not got the head of it at the club. I'll mention some other names though, Joe, because even though we say interim managers, realistically, the guys you're being linked to aren't interim. They will be the full-time coach. Sky are saying that Pochettino is first choice with Ten Hag second. There's also been reports as well saying that Poch is basically saying, "Come get me right now, United. I'll leave," which shows you the state of managing PSG at the moment. Now, it's also said as well that Brendan Rodgers has been linked, but it would cost £8 million to get him out of Leicester. Supposedly, George Mendes is trying to push Lopetegui to you. But I thought that'd be awful. And Luis Enrique has also distanced himself from the job. I think saying something like, "Is it April Fool's Day?" If you had your pick right there, Joe, I can let you pick any one of them. Who are you going for? Ten Hag, Poch? Which one is your number one?
Yeah, it'd be one of those two, wouldn't it? It'd be one of those two. I think we can probably rule Zinedine Zidane out. I just don't think he wants the job, to be honest with you. I'm not overly convinced he wants any job that's not PSG, really, across world football. He's going to be very picky about his next role. And like you said, doesn't speak English. I know from reading a lot of articles that his wife certainly doesn't want to move to England. So that's just an unrealistic one. Let's discount Zinedine Zidane straight away. I think Luis Enrique would be an okay appointment. But again, like Zidane, I think it's close to a 0% chance. With a World Cup 12 months away, he's certainly going to want to manage that Spain team to World Cup glory if possible. So the 2 names we're left with, or 3 potentially if you include Brendan Rodgers, who I think is a good coach, but would be uninspiring for me as a Manchester United fan. before I even start to think about his Liverpool connections. The fact that Manchester United would be considering appointing a Liverpool manager who nearly won them a title, I think is close to embarrassing. So not too keen on Brendan Rodgers as Manchester United manager. I think Pochettino, for me, is still the guy, isn't he? Like, if United can get Poch mid-season, United need to be moving mountains to get Pochettino out of PSG. I really, really believe that. Obviously, we all know the situation at PSG. Pochettino clearly isn't happy there. And the main reason remains Leonardo, as it seems to be for every single manager that's there, because Leonardo holds all power at the club, makes all footballing decisions, and the coach is just that. He literally is just a coach on the training ground. Pochettino has no say behind the scenes in transfers or in squad building or in academy decisions or in training ground decisions. All he does, effectively, Poch, is head coach. So I mean, for a man like Pochettino, who at Tottenham had pretty much all power, didn't want a director of football massively, is an odd position to be in. So if United can get Poch, for God's sake, United needs to be moving mountains. We all know how good of a coach Poch is, and how much he's kind of wanted to manage Manchester United in the past. So I think he would probably be my number one selection, Mauricio Pochettino. I just think it's probably still unrealistic, even with what I've said, the whole Leonardo situation. He's still got a front line of Messi, Neymar and Mbappe, and he's still surely going to want to win the Champions League with them, isn't he? If he left mid-season, it would be bizarre, wouldn't it? It would be bizarre. So then, kind of looking at Ten Hag, obviously I would love Erik Ten Hag, but having done a lot of research on Ajax and a lot of research on Ten Hag, he is a very, very introverted coach. He needs a lot of systems in place around him. A little bit unlike Poch, he is more of just a training ground coach specialist. He's not so involved in the behind-the-scenes running of the club. The majority of that falls to Mark Overmars at Ajax. And Mark Overmars has done such a fantastic job at Ajax in squad building, in academy graduation, that Ten Hag is kind of able to use his skills on the training ground really well, and I'm not sure those structures are in place at Manchester United for a manager like Erik Ten Hag right now. You'd have to do an awful lot of work. So for me, Pochettino remains the number one choice. I just am extremely sceptical United are going to be able to get him. If we were to get an interim coach, obviously there's two names that seem to be on the table that are realistic interim options. That's Laurent Blanc, who I think is currently managing out in Qatar. He's not been involved in any major European setup since he left PSG, I don't think, but he does have a wealth of experience, of course. And then we know about Ralf Rangnick, don't we? He is kind of a club developer. That might be an interesting option, you know. If we have to get an interim coach, I remain pretty solid against that idea, but if we have to get an interim coach, I think I would prefer Rangnick to come in until the summer and then take up a role within the footballing department, maybe not as director of football, but as an advisor or a consultant or some sort of position alongside the likes of John Murtaugh and Richard Arnold. And then that would allow a manager like Ten Hag to potentially work. But I still think Pochettino is the best option for me as a Manchester United fan. And I hear people say, well, he hasn't won anything, he hasn't won any trophies. It's just like a painful argument for me now. It really is a painful argument. I think that anybody who watched Pochettino's Tottenham for any sort of period of time know how good of a coach he is. You know how respected he is in the Premier League. And the idea that because he hasn't won the Ligue 1 title yet, he should be discounted, I think, is comical. I don't know what you think, Zach, but I think for me, Pochettino's the guy.
Yeah, I completely agree. Poch seems to be wanting to leave PSG, and if you can get him, then yeah, as you said, move everything to try and make that happen. As for an interim, like I'm also on the same feet as you. Like you've got a Champions League run that you can still do, right? Like, and to be fair, as you mentioned, the guys that you get in, I don't think would be bad for interim. There are much worse interim managers out there. I mean, I feel like Ralf Rangnick seems to, every time there's a good job opening up, he puts himself in the shopping window and takes himself away from it after a couple of weeks. He's got great PR just to keep himself relevant. But yeah, I think you've summed it up really, really well there. I've got one question for you.
Go on.
I think we'll end it on this. Whoever comes in, Do you think the squad needs a huge turnover?
No.
Or do you think you're basically nearly there anyway?
I think the squad is in a pretty good position, and we can argue about whether or not Man United need 2 defensive midfielders. They certainly need 1, but other than that, you look at the squad and you think it's pretty well stocked here. We've got 2 really good goalkeepers. We've probably got 4 centre backs. Varane especially is one that's world class. Central midfield is a problem area, and the forward line is an absolute joke. It's probably one of the best in world football. So I think the squad is in a really good position, and whoever comes in is going to be rubbing their hands together and looking at that team thinking, wow, I've got some options here. The issue does remain, though, that the board, I just don't trust them to appoint the right man, to be honest with you. Like, we laugh at that Steve Bruce interim, but our board is that calamitous that could actually be a thing. Like, I just... yeah, man. I think the squad is fine, though.
Okay, brilliant. Well, that is Manchester United and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Please, everyone at home, leave your thoughts in the comments below. It's also worth mentioning Joe actually wasn't meant to be in today, and he's come in specifically for this, so you guys couldn't be like, well, Joe's missing out.
Oh, Joe's crying away. No, I'm not.
Exactly. He's taken the brunt of it. But let's move on to our winners then, and it comes from @ConnorEvans. And I mean, I think it's just about lucky to call them winners with the way the game went. Tottenham Hotspur, very much a game of 2 halves in this game, wasn't it, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I watched the first half of this game in a pub before I went to the comedy club, and Tottenham were a comedy show out there. Honestly, they were laughably bad, I thought, in that first 45 minutes. Leeds were just totally dominant. It actually reminded me of a Nuno performance, that first 45 minutes. There was just absolutely no idea for ball progression through the midfield. The wing-backs, I know that Conte wants to set them up high, and we've seen him do that so successfully at clubs managed past, but defensively were a catastrophe. Like Emerson Royale versus Jack Harrison, that 30-45 was a mismatch. For the goal, he was all over the place. Reguilon was on the wrong side of Dan James, and I felt going into the break, Leeds would go on to win that game. But Antonio Conte, he has that ability, doesn't he, at half-time to get into the players, to lay into the players, and clearly plenty changed after the break. I mean, you've just got to look at the running stats, really, to tell you the impact Conte had. They outrun Leeds by 3.7 kilometres in that second half, which nobody does to a Leeds team. We know how hard this Leeds side work. Calvin Phillips, who should really have been on the winning side, to be honest with you, was fantastic on the night. They started to pressure him down, didn't they? They offered a little bit more defensive solidity by bringing on Davinson Sanchez in that right back, like the right centre-back role to support Emerson Royale, who, like I said, looked suspect when he was going backwards at the best of times. But overall, it was a much improved second 45, and I think Conte will have learnt an awful lot from that first 45 that he can implement going forward, to be honest with you. I don't think, yet again, they had a shot on target in the first 45, and up to the break, that was 2.5 games they were going into without a shot on target, which is just unacceptable. But after the break, much improvements, 4 shots on target, Jalab. They were just way better.
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned having no shots on target there. Now, Tottenham were the first team since Opta started gathering data back in 2003 to go 6 straight halves without having a shot on target. Yeah, I've got to give a massive shout out as well to Lucas Moura, who got his assist and created another 2 chances. He has actually looked fantastic under Conte, and he's also pretty good under Nuno as well. Reguilon put it down to having a big team mentality. I'm not so sure about that. It's one of those games where you kind of come away from it thinking it could have gone either way, to be quite honest. Harry Kane at the moment, it's worrying. I think if you're a Spurs fan, you're watching that, he just doesn't look the same. Doesn't look like the same Harry Kane that was playing a week ago for England. And it's not necessarily that the setups are hugely different under Gareth Southgate as it is under Antonio Conte. It is very, very worrying, I think, if you're a Spurs fan to see that. And obviously now he's got his big time manager that he loves having, that he wanted so badly in Pep Guardiola, and loved having in Jose Mourinho now. And obviously it's not going to happen straight away, and you will give him a few weeks' time. But we are getting, not a million miles away from halfway through this season, and you're yet to kind of see the Harry Kane that we're all used to and love seeing week in, week out. But so let's have a look at what Antonio Conte said about his Spurs side.
In these moments, there are 4 teams that there is a gap, no? There is a gap. I'm not scared about this. We want to fight. We want to fight to try to stay close. If there is one team that sleep in this season or make mistakes, we must be there.
Moving on to our losers then. Of course, it's going to be Leicester City, who are now winless in their last 5 Premier League games. Not good enough at all from Brendan Rodgers' side. But Chelsea, on the other hand, I actually thought, yet again, I tweeted this on the day, unbelievably impressive. They are a machine right now, and I maintain that for me, they're the best side in the division. I think when you add Lukaku back into this mix, they are as close to unstoppable as I've seen the team so far. I know that Man City are also like bopping teams about, but they have big dips, Man City. They go through a game when they're scoring 6, then they just can't hit the back of the net. Chelsea just like almost coasting in third gear and beating everyone at the moment, Zach.
Yeah, I mean, I would say City are better than us personally,
Okay.
and maybe I'm being modest. I don't know, but I do agree with consistency that the Chelsea team has at the moment is very impressive. We are coming up against teams and performing very, very well, like we did especially in the first half of this Leicester game. I mean, Leicester weren't great, I'll be honest as well, especially again in that first half, but Chelsea just kind of dominated. We'd obviously learnt and looked into how bad Leicester had been at set pieces and defending them. That's
So
how the
bad.
first goal came through with Rudiger. He was just, considering Rudiger is probably one of Chelsea's best aerial threats, especially now that Zuma's gone, and he's not necessarily amazing at it. It was very, very weird tactic for Leicester to just kind of like not mark him and let him be by himself on Schmeichel and run into the box. Yeah, very, very odd. N'Golo Kante was absolutely fantastic in this game against his old side. Like, just dominated that midfield. A real N'Golo Kante performance, and obviously tips it off with a weak foot shot from outside the box to score. But really, this at the moment, Chelsea's game is coming down to their wing backs. Ben Chilwell is basically playing striker at times.
What's going on?
He was so unlucky not to score. He probably should score. He hits the crossbar, has another opportunity that brings a fantastic save from Schmeichel. And the way he's playing his football at the moment is really, really impressive. It actually surprised me. When we signed Ben Chilwell, I thought he was a great left back. I didn't know so much about him at left wing back, mainly because he hadn't played there before, and he's learnt, and he's really enjoying life in this Tuchel system. And then there's Reece James. Like, look.
Wow.
People that we've had team talks and we've spoken about Reece James, Cancelo, Trent, Kyle Walker, and I think it's such a fantastic argument to have with people, especially when you don't lose your head. That is, but Reece James at the moment is playing his best football. He's only going to get better. The way he's dominating that right flank, pushing into midfield as well now, like he was in this Leicester game, he's a complete animal. He's dominating it, and so many chances are coming through him down that right flank, and even on a defensive side as well. It's just so physically dominant, and it has a really nice partnership as well with Trevor Chalobah on that right flank, who played obviously the fantastic ball that led to the third goal for Ziyech and stuff like that. So right now, yeah, consistency has been really, really good. We've got Manchester United. I think we're going to that game on the weekend. If we can
Can't wait for that. No centre backs, no gaffer. That's going to be decent.
It'll be interesting. But tell me a little bit about Leicester though, Joe, because they weren't so good, especially in that first half.
I mean, they're all over the place at the moment. They're playing like a relegation threatened side at the moment, Leicester. They're 17th in the league for shots taken and 17th in the league for shots conceded. The drop-off has just been crazy in terms of quality. We talk about Man United falling apart. Leicester recently have been catastrophically bad. I'm sure Brendan Rodgers is going to turn it around, because when he gets those players back fit, and he has had injury problems consistently this season. You know, that Wesley Fofana injury at the start of the year has really hampered his preparations. That's very, very obvious. But something's got to change. Something's got to give. The front line look all over the place. The lack of balance is concerning, in my opinion. I know that Patson Daka isn't quite up and running in the league yet, but you know, when they bought Lookman off and Barnes off at half time for, who was it, Maddison and Kelechi Iheanacho, I think, they maybe looked a little bit better in terms of balance, but I don't know what's going on at Leicester, but they need to right some wrongs very quickly. There needs to be some honest conversations, and I think Brendan Rodgers has that sort of Manchester United spectre looming over his head, and he sat down with some of the leadership team at Leicester and said, look, I'm not going to be taking that job. I'm here for the long term. And if he is there for the long term, he needs to start arresting this slump pretty quickly, because it could become an issue. We're talking about Leicester being a consistent Champions League challenger. This season they look a long way off of a top 6 spot, and that's not me saying that they're not going to be able to turn it around, but you can't be 17th in the league for shots conceded and shots taken and expect to be challenging for the Champions League. And Man United are in similar sort of territory, and they've sacked their manager. Obviously it's not as bad at Leicester. I'm not saying Brendan Rodgers should be sacked, definitely not, but yeah, they're not in a good place, Jalab.
Indeed. Well, there we have it. That is winners and losers. I think we should give a shout out to Liverpool as well. Obviously, they beat Arsenal 4-0. An absolute dominant performance. I've never seen a goalkeeper produce so many saves like Ramsdale did and still lose 4-0. It was very unfortunate on his end. Definitely give them a shout out. Moment of the week, Joe. I'll give you some options. Cancelo assist. Derby getting back to 0 points. Benteke as well, scoring 2 goals.
Yeah, I think it's probably got to be that Joao Cancelo assist, isn't it? It's just outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous. And we're not even mentioning the Rodri worldie. But yeah, the Joao Cancelo assist is just, it's comical, isn't it?
Well, there we have it. Again, let us know what you thought about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Manchester United, all that good stuff down below in the comment section. Well, if you're a United fan, maybe not so much good stuff. If you want to check out us on Snapchat, type Football Daily in on there. Make sure you go over to Euro Football Daily for all the Europe's best football content. And we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.